Don't you understand my English language? Together we can conquer the world and learn so much for science.
Don't be so excited, man.
My feelings are all over the place tonight. The theme tune of The Thing from Carpenter has been stuck in my head for the last 2 weeks. These movies have made me question my career as a podcast host, perhaps more than any other movies in this podcast.
Great art usually tends to have that effect on the one who experiences it.
Yeah. Let's see what we think about that tonight. I'm really curious to hear your views on this. Actually, that there might be some huge gaps that we will be unable to breach, but hey, that's typical for this podcast.
Well, I don't know. I mean, looking back into the history of this podcast and the episodes of the late era, I would say that the only real struggle that you and I perhaps might have tonight is the question which one is the better, the original or John Carpenter's, well, not a remake, more of a like adaptation of the original story.
Yeah. And maybe we can talk a little bit about the novella.
Yeah, by all means. In fact, we can if you feel like up to it, we can quickly touch upon the Thing as a media franchise, or the John Carpenter's The Thing as a media franchise, because that is basically the whole multimedia franchise that, or the film on which shoulders the whole multimedia franchise aspect of The Thing has been built upon.
Yeah. The story, of course, started in 1938 with the Who Goes There novella that the Thing phenomena is based on. Interestingly, there is a notable lack of action scenes. I mean, there are action scenes, but there are very few. And all of these sort of adaptations really do their own baby and interpretation.
Very much, yeah. The one that is the furthest away from the original source material would be the Howard Hawks film.
Yeah.
Which is so far removed from the source material that you can, in my opinion, kind of technically already ask, like, is it an adaptation of Campbell's short story or is it not?
And then the second thing to maybe discuss is that is it fair that Howard Hawks removed it so much from the novella, because I'm not sure that there is so much in Who Goes There that you would necessarily want to really closely follow it, and neither of these movies do.
Well, it's really hard to say from the aspect of Hawks' film, in my opinion. But with John Carpenter, with Carpenter, I can really say that I feel that Carpenter made an adaptation of the short story. Not so particularly necessarily the action beats of the short story. There's a well, like he does take some of them, like for example the crew deciding to destroy all vehicles. But in the short story, it's more of a, well, it's forced upon the crew. One member sabotages all the airplanes so that no one can leave the camp, but the whole crew just accepts it and goes with it as the right course of action. In Carpenter's film, if I remember correctly, nobody actually really sabotages, for example, the airplane. They just, as a group, they decided that nobody's going to use it. But what Carpenter, in my opinion, really takes from Campbell's short story is the feeling of isolation and the aspect of paranoia within the group. And the whole idea of the Thing basically being able to assimilate you 100%. Both on cellular level, and even though Carpenter's film never actually touches upon this plot point, in Campbell's short story, the point is being made that the thing is also telepathic. So it can assimilate and mirror and read your thoughts. And, well, Carpenter never does this, but the thing assimilates its victims so closely and so perfectly that you could kind of almost see the telepathy being in that film. Carpenter's The Thing is not telepathic, but the way how closely and how perfectly it still assimilates the core you, your behavior patterns, and the way how, like, almost to a level of your thinking processes. That's how closely the assimilation goes in Carpenter films. So you can kind of see, like, it's not telepathy, but you can kind of see perhaps there's a like a tiny sliver of it.
Would it be far-fetched to say that Terminator 2 has certain origins in the Thing's antagonist, whereas Carpenter has like a faceless monster, can assimilate into anything, any life form or appearance-wise. And in Terminator 2, you have this metallic monster who does have the main form, something that we can identify with. Whereas I think Carpenter's films problem might be, or I think very much is, that the Thing can take any forms, and therefore we as an audience have a hard time identifying with the monster. The monster can be anything. It's one of those spectacle visual effects shots where you see like an alien head with the legs of a spider, things like that, and then in the next shot it's something that's coming out of a wolf, something coming out of a person, and etc., and some kind of a totem pole of different faces. So that might be one of my biggest problem points with the 1982.
Okay, I, on the other hand, I'm completely on the opposite camp. Like, to me, one of the things that I really do like in Carpenter's interpretation is the fact how meticulously he blurs your capability of following the story or following who is assimilated and who is not. And it has gone into a point where it's become kind of like a pet peeve of YouTube, The Thing video content, where even today people are trying to piece together the clues and gather the evidence and answer the age-old questions like who had the keys, and is Charles assimilated or is he not, and who got assimilated first, and
there's no answer, who cares?
To me, that's kind of a testament of how well Carpenter actually pulled off his film. And I do appreciate it because that was an intentional effort from Carpenter's end. Like, there is that old story, rumor concerning the production of Carpenter's film that, well, you have the scene where the Thing is currently masquerading as the dog, and wanders around the base. And that's way before the first attack happens. So the dog walks into this room where one guy is, and you don't see who is in that room, but you can see the man's silhouette contrasted against the wall, and you can see that he pets the dog, which is the first assimilation, the human assimilation. And as the story goes, that shadow belongs to none of the cast members. Carpenter intentionally cast an unknown and unshown member of the film crew into that scene, just so that nobody actually can tell from the shadow who is being assimilated in that moment. That shows intent, and that shows forward thinkingness from Carpenter's end that I really do appreciate. And because of that, I really do enjoy the fact that you can't tell who is the Thing in any given moment.
The forward-thinkingness wasn't there all the time. If you think about the ending of the film, that went through quite a few iterations, at least 3 that I'm aware of. In one of those iterations, we show how the husky, the doggy, is running away, as, you know, winking to the audience that, yeah, the Thing got away. But to give more ambiguity, they decided on this more ambiguous ending. Problem is that, well, at least when the Thing was in the theaters, none of the endings really were something that the audience wanted to see. Like, it was too ambiguous. Like, some critics were saying, well, so what the hell, now they're gonna freeze to death, and what kind of ending is this? To the test audiences, all the endings didn't seem to work as far as I know.
Yeah, that is one of the famous legacies of Carpenter's film. Like, the critics hated it, and it flopped at box office.
Yeah.
And Carpenter had to do a whole bunch of films. Like, for example, his really good adaptation of Stephen King's Christie, simply because the thing went tits up at the box office and he somehow had to pay the bills. Once again, one of the reviews where I'm completely different minds with Roger Ebert. Ebert famously hated, and also so did Siskel, this film when it came out, and it's one of those films that have been kind of saved by the cult following that it gathered like the following decades, following the film's original release.
Yeah, that's the curious case. Everybody seemed to freaking hate this film when it was released. It was made for something like $50 million and it garnered $90 million. And as we have spoken ad nauseum in this podcast, it probably doesn't mean that it even got its money back because of all the marketing and things that are probably not included in the overall budget, or could be.
Yeah, I actually couldn't really track how big of the marketing effort for the thing was.
Yeah, I couldn't even track what was the box office turnout of the film internationally. I was checking the box office Mojo, and it showed that internationally it would have garnered something like $1.2K. So either it really didn't have any kind of international circulation, basically, or there is just no proper statistics out there. But anyway, I think it comes down to the problem of me not liking the kind of faceless monster. I'm not also appreciating really that the characters, there's little character build up, there is really little character development, and it's slow, and that there are pieces of extended talking, then there's a couple, 3 or 4 of these big effect pieces, which, yes, I guess are impressive for the time and impressive overall as puppetry.
Impressive still today.
Yeah, well, but then you go like, okay, these are impressive, but if you look at this as just plainly as a film watcher, okay, you find one aspect that you can appreciate. Oh, look at these effects. But that's not mainly why we're in the theater. We're in the theater to appreciate the whole package. I'm not the one going into the audience in the theater and lights go out and I see an amazing effect. I'm never like, wow, how did they make those things? Rather, I'm trying to kind of, I guess, assimilate or become part of the movie's world, taking it in as a whole, once again. So
yeah, you appreciate the sense of tension and paranoia that exists through the film. That's what you gravitate toward for, and when you are looking at it, that's like your core thing. Being at the edge of your seat because you don't know who's being assimilated, and it's kind of hard to tell. Like, can they even survive against an opponent that is this omnipotent?
But there's something about the characters that I just don't give a fuck. I mean, they have the location of Antarctica, and then you would think that they would give you this feeling of isolation and paranoia. To a degree, I guess, yeah. But I felt that it was really underutilized. The environment of Antarctica wasn't so much used. You have the element of cold, you have the element of helplessness when things go break and things like that. But I was looking for something more. I don't know what that something could have been, but it doesn't tell you anything about Antarctica beyond that.
Yeah, or I don't know what you were looking at for either, and therefore I can't help you, because by God, if there is not points that the film brings up about how shitty your situation so easily can be on Antarctica. Like, MacReady is locked out of the main hub of their center for what? Half an hour of 20 minutes, and he almost freezes to death.
And no one cares.
And like they are constantly dealing with the problem of cold and the fact that they can't really see what goes outside of their camp, out there in the snow and in the blizzard. And that's also an element that the thing tries to use for its advantage. It likes to stay outside or try to move outside, because there you can't actually tell who is actually going and where, because everybody is constantly wearing like hardened winter jackets, and they have their glasses on, and all of these small pieces of clothing that you gotta hide away your facial features, so when you are at a small distance away you can't tell who you are actually dealing with. And also that the fact that the snowstorm kind of makes it a nightmare to actually see what goes out there, or who goes out there.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I can't challenge either what you're feeling when you're watching this film. You felt the paranoia, you felt the isolation, whereas I didn't. So I guess you identified with the characters stronger than I did for unknown reasons.
Yeah, I did identify with MacReady and Giles. The one thing that I do admit is the fact that, okay, yeah, Carpenter's film is not strong on characterization. All of the characters are caricatures or stereotypes. But to me, it's not a hindrance for the film. To me, it actually plays into the film's advantage. Because what it also does, like, even though you don't get a rich lead character, what it does grant you, it grants you a space where that things can actually move on a brisker space, and it also takes away from your opportunity to actually tell who is a good guy and who is a not, who is our hero and who is not, who is going to survive and who is not. That actually is one of the problems that I have with the prequel sequel thing, which, contrary to Carpenter, actually finally has characters and builds its characters.
Yeah.
And because of that, it's kinda, in my opinion, it's more boring film to a point. And it's also more predictable film to a point. Not completely, like first time seeing it, I didn't see how the film is going to end and who is going to pull it through. Outside of course, the dude flying the helicopter and the sniper taking aim at the dog at the beginning of the Carpenter film. But outside of that,
That was nice.
I didn't really know is someone going to actually survive in the prequel. But it kind of loses an element of the cold nature of its violence due to its decision to start to have fleshed out characters.
Yeah, but I really appreciated actually in the 2011 version how they tried to flesh out the characters, and I felt that the whole first act of 2011 film might have been the best first act out of all of these. Of course, I do really appreciate in Carpenter's version the whole opening with the husky and the helicopter. That really builds interest in the film. I think that's wonderfully done. When I first saw the film, I was just expecting the husky to show the helicopter the way, and then when the guy pulls the weapon out, I was wondering, okay, is this guy hungry? Has he lost his mind? What the hell is going on? So that's a great first act. But coming back to the 2011 film, definitely more color in the sense of characterization.
I, on the other hand, I once again strongly disagree with you. It has more color on characterization due to the fact that, it has more blatant, obvious characterization. Carpenter's film is not completely void of this, but in Carpenter, the characters that most get, some meat around their bones would be MacReady and Childs. Whereas, the 2011 version has more traditional, hey, I am a character X, hey, I'm the character Y. But two problems that I have with this whole thing is that, A, even though the 2011 version has more character building in it, it still somehow can't, in my opinion, escape from the same trappings that Carpenter's film knowingly landed, which is the fact that all of the characters still are stereotypical archetypes of what they are.
Yeah.
You have the
Absolutely.
science lady who is really good in science, then you have the man scientist who is like, you shut your mouth, woman.
Yeah.
Which is the clear hero and human antagonist setup. And then you have Edgerton. Yeah, it's a bunch of Swedes on a Norwegian outpost, but they have American helicopter pilot for reasons of X. And even though Edgerton he's not really the romantic interest for Mary Elizabeth Winstead in the film. Like, they don't really fall in love, but oh my god, if the film does not blue ball you into that direction as hard as it possibly can. So basically what you have the typical caricatures.
Yeah.
And the film kind of does that, in my opinion, by accident. And my second problem with the more characters in your The Thing film is that, well, this once again, it comes back to how the violence operates. Due to the fact that basically the characters are quite thin in Carpenter's film, it allows the Carpenter's film to have more colder approach to the violence. Violence happens as somebody dies and nobody really mourns anyone. The doctor, tries to do CPR and gets his hands bitten off, and nobody actually reacts to that. They react to the thing, they react to the situation, but nobody is like crying over the dead doctor.
But imagine if you were, like, double the impact. Triple.
Well, I don't have to, because the 2011 film actually tries to pull that off. To an infuriating point, in my opinion. And like one good example of this is when Edward Wollner Thing, attacks the people at the camp. When it's revealed to you that Wollner is at the Thing. What it pulls off in that moment is like you have that tentacle stab moment. A huge tentacle grows out of Wollner's chest and stabs two people. And these two people are Adam Finch, the young American scientist working for Dr. Sanders' research assistant, the young American lad that shows up in the opening of the film to tell Mary Elizabeth Winstead that, you should come into this Norwegian outpost. He's one who dies. And the second one is the helicopter pilot friend of Edgerton's character, played by Advale. And I can't pronounce the last name, unfortunately. And in that moment, like two deaths. And when Advale bites it, you get 3 reaction shots. And Elizabeth Winstead goes to, his bleeding body and he's trying to help him and stuff like that. So the film is very strongly telling you that, oh my god, tentacle stabbed Advale. Huge emotional shock. And I'm looking at it kind of going like, well, fuck me. First of all, I'm not feeling anything. And the second of all, because of this, because they now tell you, oh my god, this character just died. It takes me away from the situation, or it takes me away from the thing in that situation, who still should be the main primary threat. I mean, the Wollner thing is still rampaging in that same bloody room, but still, 2 characters are taking a break from the action just so that they can be appalled by the fact that Adevale just bite it. And I'm kind of like, guys, hey, get your priorities straight.
To be honest, I didn't feel that was a very strong point to argue about the film losing its focus. I didn't even really pay attention to the fact when I was watching the film. But noted, yeah. And even if I said that, it has the best character build-up out of these films, it still doesn't mean that I care about these characters, unfortunately. It's an interesting film, the 2011 so-called prequel, because basically it is a remake of The Thing from Carpenter. It's basically the same film. Slightly different, obviously, but it's the same film.
Yeah, it is. It is, and the points where it's different are the points where it actually shouldn't be different, in my opinion, because the moments where it differs from Carpenter's movie are exactly the moments where it's just blatantly setting up callbacks to the Carpenter's movie. The most infamous of these, in my opinion, is the Edgerton gets the axe stuck on the wall moment. Like, Edgerton is reaching to pull the axe from the wall, and Mary Elizabeth Winstead just goes like, no, leave it. Because it's there in the Carpenter's version.
Yeah.
It's a callback, and then they are like, okay.
Yeah.
And outside of like those moments, it's pretty much, it's almost beat for beat Carpenter's film.
If moving on to different gears a bit, then there is the thing with music. Ennio Morricone is hired to do the soundtrack for 1982. Apparently it doesn't have a freaking singlest clue of what Carpenter wants, comes up with some ding-dong sounds, and then, 90% of the soundtrack is scrapped. It's released years and years later. Many critics seem to say that it's really repetitive and not interesting. Of course, if you can't identify, if you don't have the scenes to connect the music to, then in many cases soundtracks can be kind of meaningless because you don't have the emotional connection there. It sounds like a soundtrack that wasn't created with a lot of intent, that Ennio Morricone just didn't wake up one morning and say that this is exactly how it should sound. Instead, it was just, let's put something together. And so he did. And I'm surprised that people are all excited about it. Carpenter, indeed, took most of it out, then just used the main theme, maybe a couple of other small pieces of music. And then Carpenter and Alan Howard, they added a couple of, basically sound effects there. And that's it.
Yeah, but then again, that quite often that is the story behind the famous film scores. Or that is the situation behind the famous film scores. Either A, they're really simplistic, or B, they are loud and bombastic, but the part that everybody remembers and the part that gets everybody's hearts pumping is just like a small snippet from the overall score. Yeah. The B applies to Indiana Jones scores, where the it's just a small part of it. It applies to RoboCop score, where the is just a really small part of it. It applies to the Conan score. On the other hand, the A, they are really simplistic, and yet they are hugely rememberable. Well, it applies to the thing. The score is really, really simple. But so was the score of Halloween, which was just basically Carpenter just hitting 2 notes on a fucking electric keyboard.
Which got vastly improved in the sequels when instead of din dun dun, you got the din dun dun mega mix.
Yeah, it's many of the gifts that Rob Zombie gave us.
Him too. I wanted to pick on the whole science thing in these movies, or the science with a Z at the end. The demonization of science in these films, and making the science the stupid as fuck science. Also, the scientist also being, as a character, mainly stupid, maybe bar from 2011 version, but it's always some evil genius who wants to, rule over everyone else and take the samples and ruin the whole fucking thing. And everybody hates him, and then the movies become really anti-science, and we should fear scientists, and at least building that kind of negativity towards science.
Yeah, just a small clarification there for our listeners. Karri tried to say, like it may have sounded like Karri said 2011, but what Karri was really trying to say was 1982.
And especially 1951.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, if you want to play with this can of worms, you basically have to go all the way back to, the original novel.
Yeah.
The first depiction of the scientists. From all of these basically the different sources of the story. Well, we are dealing with a telepathic shape-shifting alien. So I don't know exactly what is the exact genetic pattern of that type of a thing. Unfortunately, I left my hydroelectric gene sequencer at my other flat, so it's not here with me now today at studio. Therefore, can't exactly say how accurate the science around the situation and around the thing is in the novel. But it's sound enough. Like, the logic that they operate is sound enough that you can kind of believe that, yeah, these are people who are trying to think their way around the situation. I don't feel that it really demonizes the science or the scientists. In fact, in the novel, the scientists, even though they do panic and they do some pretty drastic actions, like, for example, disabling every mode of transportation out of the base, but that still actually is pretty smart move in that situation. You don't want the thing to escape. And that's also my take kind of with Carpenter's version of the story. It doesn't really have a scientist character there outside of Blair who, well, goes crazy and gets locked off from the rest of the group. But McCready's logic behind his blood test is not actually that bad. And I don't think that Blair really is that much demonized in Carpenter's film. Like, certainly, yeah, he goes crazy and messes up the place, and eventually he is revealed to be, having been assimilated at least at some point of the story. But his mental breakdown at the same moment when he realizes exactly how dangerous the situation is if the thing manages to escape, in my opinion, it's kind of a justifiable. The films that actually have less favorable look on the scientists, in my opinion, is the 2011 version, where, first of all, the whole science thing around the thing goes into a dick-waving competition.
There is definitely no science. Every time someone is doing the sciencing, it happens in about 4 minutes, and the so-called scientist determines from the available evidence that yes, this is a shape-shifting, transforming, assimilating, copying monster that is, first of all, one piece but can be split into millions of pieces. And all of these separate pieces are also intelligent beings that can also multiply and think and do, in their world, rational decisions for their survival.
Yeah, so that is an argument, but counterpoint to your argument. They were bloody right at the end of the day. And we are talking about that at source material, also telepathic shape-shifting alien.
Yeah.
So the optimal laboratory procedures are not necessarily a focal point of the scientific research in this one situation.
I definitely don't find the source novel, the source material, to be in any way like a holy element. It's really one of those really escapist, simple little sci-fi books that have been released like millions of times in those times, and with the most simplest imagination. Like, this is like so run-of-the-mill, this book, that I don't know what to say, man. Like, these kind
of... Well, the first thing you can say is an apologies from Campbell's, at this point, rotting bones.
Yeah, I mean, there was a point why these guys were writing under pseudonyms at the time. Of course, later on, I don't know, was it after the 1982 film or what, then they were okay to come out that, yeah, it was me who wrote this shit. There is the fear of the ugly, obviously, in all of these versions, the fear of the different, and of course it's a monster from outer space that wants to kill the humans. Yeah, and this goes for many of the big hit scientific sci-fi movies out there. So
yeah, I don't remember you crying after body positivity in bloody Alien.
I know. But you know, maybe the difference is that it just comes so to your face here that especially all the predictions, not science, but they're predictions that are quite detailed, I might add. All of them come to be, which is hilarious. They surmise that this monster is copying and multiplying, and or is a fucking carrot and is eating cabbages. It all comes to be. Like,
well, of course it comes to be. The men of science are doing science. Like, I'm starting to get where your major hang-up here is coming from. That's from the fact that you read the short story first.
I did.
And yeah, well, bloody me. See how the thing science logic actually plays out in real life. I must right away able to deduct this little nugget of information. But you read it first, and you agreed with Blair when you were reading that. That was like your totem animal. And Blair has the whole tangent about how rest of the group are fat shaming and the thing and are in no way body positive, and they are just, thinking that it's hostile simply because it's ugly as fuck. And that's the core tangent that you carried with you throughout the whole experience of going through the different iterations of the thing.
Well.
Or Campbell's short story, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Of course, I've seen 1951 and 1982 versions before. This was the first time when I had the guts to go and look at the 2011 version. But I mean, the overarching point is that we're talking about a 7-tentacled hand monster with a 3-foot tongue, 3 glaring red eyes, and weird pasta hair, whatever, waving behind it. Like that.
Yeah, and I look at that thing, and the first thing I think about is a communist.
What?
which is in keeping the tone of the making of these films.
So that's the starting point, and then we go to more absurdity in the 1951, the first adaptation to film. There are these similar things that were 4 minutes of sciencing, and then you make the prediction that this monster is evil and wants to kill you. And except that in 1951 version, it's basically a vegetable that we're dealing with. Mm-hmm. It's a vegetable with a human build throughout the film. So there's no shape-shifting, none of that. It apparently is able to copy itself to other earthly vegetation. And
it leaves spores that it can plant in the earth's soil.
Something like that.
I guess grew more things had it had a chance and time.
Anyway, a vegetable with a human build in this film. A violent vegetable, a carrot, basically.
An intelligent vegetable, intelligent in quotation marks.
A carrot that kills cabbages, yes.
Uh-huh.
Consumes human blood for survival and growth.
Yeah, it's kind of like the film Killer Tomatoes, except made seriously.
Yeah, like...
But seriously, aliens deserve to be demonized. They are aliens.
Yeah, but there is no need to be trying to figure out the shape of this thing. The holy cat, it's just a man in a costume. And there's still just like, what, 3 different moments where he pops up. Yeah, granted, the special effects were really not up to par, or the budget was not up to par, at least, during that time to make any more interesting of an alien creature, yeah. But
it also was not like the tone of the times. Like back in those days, if you made a creature feature, it either was a dude in a lizard costume a la Godzilla, or if you were in US, it was a man in a mad costume.
Yeah.
A la Frankenstein, Dracula, the creature from Black Lagoon, and the thing from the other world.
Yeah, this is coming on the heels of those times when you had the Roswell incident in the 1940s, and end of the 1940s, I believe. And then we go to this phenomena when there's quite a lot of science fiction movies coming out around that time. The Day the Earth Stood Still and what have you, the invasion of the body snatchers and things like that. But still, like the lack of a powerful villain in this film, it hurts the film because the rest of the film is not there to support it. Like you have endless scenes where people are talking and trying to wonder what kind of thing they're dealing with. And they go on and on and on. And of course they are off their time. But god damn, it starts to irk me with these predictions that, or actually just plain statements that this is how it's gonna be, this is what we're dealing with. You can quote me on that on fucking Nature. You have these medium full shots and full shots endlessly that start to get awfully repetitive. I know, it was the times. You didn't have...
Yeah, it was the times.
Absolutely.
Cinematography was what it was.
Also, maybe you didn't have the resources to take, different angles. You just put the camera somewhere and shoot.
One of the reasons why I actually... I've been waiting to touch upon with you the 1951 version.
It's because before I've said that this is my favorite out of the 3.
Precisely. God damn, we are an hour into this episode. I'm waiting when we are going to touch this can of worms. There's an old episode of this very podcast where you, at least in the recording session, you stated that this is your favorite version of the thing.
Okay.
And now we are fucking finally talking about the goddamn bloodthirsty human-sized carrot.
Okay, I will address this little conundrum. So I watched Carpenter's The Thing, the first out of these versions. That was like a long time ago, 25 years odd or something. And then much later, maybe just like the last 10 years, I watched the Howard Hawks version. I just remember watching from the Finnish telly the 1982 version and being really bored watching it. I couldn't remember a single goddamn thing from it. Then I watched the Howard Hawks film, and I'm like, dude, this is actually a pretty good film and was more engaging than the 1982 version. Maybe it was just the state of mind that I was in. I remember watching the Howard Hawks version and being like really focused, and I had really good focus that day, and I was really into watching this film. I had seen the little clips in 1978 Halloween, and I was kind of curious about the film's world. But now coming back to the whole trilogy of films, what I think about the Howard Hawks version now, well, yeah, I don't know what I was smoking that day, but definitely not the best version out of this. I'll take that back right now.
Yeah, because my experience with the Thing movies adaptations is similar to you. Most likely, just like everybody else in Finland, my first experience with the Things was Carpenter's 1982. During my first time, I was really young. I couldn't even watch the whole film. It just came from the TV, and it happened to be the moment when the dog gets his hand bitten off. The small head grows from the dude's chest, and his neck tears off, and the head lingers on the floor. That was way too graphic for me. Like it's one of those things that have or those scenes that have always been stuck on my young mind, because I don't know, perhaps I got a bit traumatized seeing that hardcore violence at such of an early age, simply because my parents were not in the room to turn off the telly the moment I was channel surfing. But that was my original experience with any The Thing related. And later on, of course, I checked out the whole film, I really liked it. But by that time, I was already aware of the 1951 version. I knew that there was this black and white film, and then I checked it out to see, because, see the original version of the Carpenter film that I really liked. I was so bloody disappointed with the 1951 version. I knew it was going to be a rough ride already when I pressed play, because I had seen some images from the film, and I knew that the Thing is going to be once again some type of a Frankenstein type of a creature. And I was like, oh. And then when the film went on and we hit, the whole super carrot aspect of it, and I was like, oh
my God.
Oh my God. This is so bad. And I still, stemming from that experience, I still don't think that the 1951 version is a masterpiece. But now, having revisited the film for this podcast, I have to say that my attitudes towards the 1951 have actually softened.
Okay, yeah.
Not to a point where I still would, champion it as a great film. I do still... It still irks me that the Thing in the movie is just, basically a Frankenstein. And the simplicity of the plot kind of is like, yeah, it's the times, but it kind of grinds my gears. And the fact that these days I can kind of appreciate and understand the whole it is plant-based aspect of it. But I still can't get around the fact that we are dealing with an intelligent and violent carrot here.
Yeah, like you, there are aspects that I like about the 1951 version. There is a certain tone, some part of the tone that I do like. Maybe the kind of darkish cinematography. I like some of the shots. I do like the overlapping dialogue, which I didn't really particularly register when I was watching it, but then I read about it later, and then I was like, oh yeah. And then you go and think back to Halloween 1978. Actually, there's overlapping dialogue there. I think it works to a great effect to, get into the world of the film. Partly, but then there is this awful dialogue and, overly simplistic plot and really easy characterization of the monster. It's such a B movie.
That it most definitely is, but it also is a B-movie that is proudly a B-movie. Or at least is that today. I don't really know how the film... How Howard Hawks perceived the film back in 1951 when he made it. Or produced it. Yeah. Everybody always grants the film to Howard Hawks, but at the end of the day, Howard Hawks only produced it. The director is Christian Nyby, so yeah, Howard Hawks is the thing. Man just, putting fronted the money.
Yeah, well, there's that kind of a age-old argument who actually was the director behind the scenes. Was it Christian Nyby or was it Howard Hawks?
Okay, I'm not actually familiar with that argument.
Okay, well, because it's such a Howard Hawke-ish movie, people tend to say that it's not actually created or directed by Christian Nyby for the most part. Also, Christian Nyby was inspired by Howard Hawks, and Christian Nyby, by his own words, says that that's exactly what it was. He was inspired by Howard Hawks, and he used a lot of Howard Hawks tricks to put the movie together. So that's why it feels like Howard Hawks' movie. That could be it. Also, during those times, before the internet age, for some reason, people had a weird tendency to stick to lies and be absolutely appalled about things, absolutely feel awkward about things. There were people who were associated with this film feeling really awkward about the end result and didn't want anything to do with it, didn't want to answer in interviews on the questions about the film. I don't really see that kind of strong reactions today anymore. If there was such of a circulating rumor that Howard Hawks would have been the actual director of the film, out of, possible huge shame, I think Christian Nyby would never tell you that, no, I didn't direct the film actually. I had nothing to do with it, I just sit by the sidelines and took the credit for credit's sake. So I don't know what to think. Could be that Christian Nyby directed, could be that he didn't.
Yeah, I do know that Nyby was taking a lot of inspiration from Hawks and looking up to him, perhaps wanting to imitate him. Another thing is also that back in the days, like already mentioned, it's shot kind of in a traditional 1950s style.
Yeah.
But you mentioned the tone of the 1951, and seeing how we are talking about all three films now as a lump, jumping from one film to the next and back to another, actually something that I do really like in both the 1951 and the 1982 versions, and something that in my opinion kind of works against the 2011 version, is that the first two movies, in my opinion, are quite obviously childs of their time. Like when it comes to the tone and the attitude that those films have.
That's definitely there. Like that, these are so much of their time. There is a certain amount of time that has passed between all of these movies that makes these quite different from each other.
Yeah, they work as a kind of a interesting time capsules.
Yeah,
into their respective time periods. But before Hawks made and Nyby directed the original film, people often like to lump these films, especially movies from the 1950s and 1960s, into the fact that the US was going through the Cold War with the USSR.
Yeah.
You can, in my opinion, you can kind of see that the shift in time when watching Hawks' version of the thing. 1949, they formed NATO. And 1950s is the time when McCarthy goes into the meeting of Republican Women's Club and presents his infamous document where he states that there's a whole bunch of communists lurking inside the State Department, starting the whole paranoistic Red Scare, the second Red Scare within the United States. 1951, the first adaptation of the thing comes out. And in my opinion, you can kind of see the innocence of those days still, like the pre-full-on Red Scare innocence in Hawks' film, where, well, the the journalist is just hanging around in Alaska, walks into the officers club, and he's like, any good news stories for me? And the first officer is like, hey, I just got called into a science outpost at the Antarctica, why don't you check along? And the journalist is like, oh gee Willis, General Lieutenant man, of course I tag along you into military inspection of an outpost. And then there's the scientist who turns evil. And you kind of have that element of the institution turning against our heroes when the scientist wants to protect the thing, and he even talks into, the high brass of the military, and they take the scientist's side and tell our heroes that you are not to harm the thing, because we wanna study it and try to understand it, etc., etc., kind of escalating the situation, but you still have that innocence at the end of the film. When, the thing punches out the science man, and they finally defeat it, and then the journalist takes the radio, and they all agree that even though, the scientist man kind of screwed everybody over and put lives in jeopardy, but we shouldn't really name him and point any fingers here. Just say that he heroically got injured when fighting the bloody alien, and the journalist man does this, and then he goes in and basically through the radio tells the whole world that outside in some backwoods of Alaska, they just, kicked E.T.'s ass. And just everybody just believes him. And believes his warnings that keep watching the skies.
Unfortunately, no one will be believing the story, or might not believe the story, because of the dumbass journalist who never manages to take a picture of the bad guy in the suit. But
I mean, in my opinion, the tone of the ending is that they all believe the journalist.
Yeah, of course, the journalist is the comedic effect of the movie, so yeah, I get it.
Yeah, I mean, logically, of course, you are correct. The world at large would be demanding some evidence that, extraterrestrial life really does exist. But in my opinion, that the tone of that ending is that, no, everybody just believes the journalist when he tells that, aliens real. Yeah, but the tone with the thing...
The tone with the thing, it's very comedic, so what do you feel about that?
I feel that it actually is quite fascinating when contrasted to, the sci-fi films that came shortly after it. Like, take, for example, 1956. After the thing releases, USSR forms the Warsaw Pact. That happens in 1955. So 1956 comes out the next really big legacy sci-fi film from US. You may have sometimes heard it. It's called The Invasion of Body Snatchers. And that film, unlike Howard Hawks' The Thing, Invasion of Body Snatchers is really cynical. And really like beware thy neighbor, the comic can lurk everywhere. Your neighbors get assimilated and they are taking the whole community and you can't trust anyone. It has really strong tone of that there. Both of these stories, The Thing and Invasion of Body Snatchers, are meant to be stories that deal with paranoia. That is, the paranoia is in the heart of Campbell's short stories. And it kinda is also in 1951's The Thing, but at the end of the day, Howard Hawks' version ends with a hopeful and positive note. All the chums come together and, they are willing to hide away what the scientist man did and how he jeopardized everybody's lives. And then you have the invasion of body snatchers.
Yeah.
Which is like this ultra paranoid. Your wife has been taken, neighbors have been taken, then your dog has been taken type of approach into the situation. And then you have the Carpenter version. So, following 1960s, we enter 1980s. US severs diplomatic relations with Iran, and Jimmy Carter promises to respond any Soviet aggression against American allies in Middle East, because that was, the days of the Afghan War. The 22nd Summer Olympics are being held in Moscow. US boycotts them and does not attend. the whole world actually almost gets destroyed in nuclear war because a device fault causes US defense computers in several locations to report an incoming nuclear attack from Soviet missiles.
So they're trying to drive to the point that people didn't want these nihilistic stories at the time, and that's why the film also failed.
I'm driving to a point that coming to 1982, when Carpenter makes his film, US has become increasingly isolated and has stayed really paranoid from the 1950s. The paranoia still is there, but now basically you have the mass destruction and isolation going on. And also you have the 1981, which is the birth of the AIDS epidemic.
Yeah.
And so to me, 1982 version, Carpenter's version of The Thing is kind of a culmination of all of this. It's the film where the isolation is all-time high, the paranoia also is all-time high. Oh boy, are these people paranoid in Carpenter's version. But at the same time, Carpenter's version is kind of critical of the whole paranoia thing. MacReady almost dies in course of the film because the rest of the group at the outpost believe that he has been assimilated, so they leave his ass outside. They block him outside so he can freeze to death. One person asks Childs, like, what if we are wrong? And Childs responds that then we are wrong. Doesn't matter, and MacReady has to break his way into the compound, basically threaten to blow himself up and take everybody with him. So they are all hyper paranoid. But at the same time, there is an element of criticism towards the paranoia.
To be honest, I would heavily challenge the claim that in any of these movies there would be anything semiotic to analyze. But of course, the audience reaction, for example, in the case of 1982 version, sure, I can perfectly see how it would have been related to, for example, the thing that I think we still didn't mention is the recession of the time, which could have led to people looking for something more warm-hearted like E.T., which came out in the same year, or was it 1980? This might have been the reason the nihilistic aspect didn't communicate with the audiences.
Yeah, could be. The E.T., now that you mentioned it, came out in 1982.
Yeah, okay.
Right at the same year that Carpenter's version came out.
Yeah.
And E.T. was a huge box office hit.
Oh boy.
Which also had the kind of a tone that, oh my god, the government.
Yeah, that's definitely there.
But I don't know, I do think that there is actually quite a lot to dissect in the first two adaptations. Just in the same way how the Carpenter's 1982 version also has the theme of purity, especially genetical purity, which exists in MacReady's blood test. And the fact that the Thing blood reacts in such of a hostile manner to heat. But also, you can kind of stretch it out. And I admit, it is stretching it out. But you can also see, once again, also the theme of ideological purity there. Like, you can take the Thing and the assimilation, and how one drop of the Thing's DNA can corrupt you and the whole ecosystem. You can kind of see it as a communism. Instant communism here.
Yeah, well, there are people who claim that Carpenter's movies have a ton of symbolism, and then Carpenter himself is always there to deny that, no, I didn't mean any of that shit, I just wanted to make a fun movie. So,
yeah, but
figure.
Then again, Carpenter is just basically a douche who pulls that stunt off simply because he disagreed with this podcast take on Halloween, and how the whole film is a metaphorical transformation of Michael Myers from a knife-wielding murder man into a legendary boogeyman of the slasher films.
I didn't mean any of that, I'm just a hippie capitalist.
Well, that was what you said, and that's also why you disagree with my deep take of your film version of The Thing.
Yeah, but I kind of I love that at least Carpenter doesn't take the high road. That, I meant every single thing that you just said, and my film is so smart and absolutely oozing of symbolism. I didn't mean any of that, this was just a dumb as bricks horror movie.
And that's where the director of the said movies is wrong, and this podcast is right.
Well, interestingly, Carpenter, in an interview following the release of the film, was actually shocked that the movie didn't succeed at the box office. And it seemed to impact him heavily, and might be still impacting him. Of course, he knows that, on home video it was a big success. And to that, my dear Henrik, I need to add why that might be and why the opinion has changed so drastically in the last 40 years. So let's go. I think there's two factors. The first factor is the thing. It's the title. It's the title and the cover that sells. People go like, oh, the thing. Yeah, interesting. Let's go. And then there are kiddies of the 1980s who watch this film. They have freaking nightmares. They love it. Maybe they're like Henrik watching it, Somebody forgot the TV on. And parents are really enjoying themselves feeding all kinds of horror movies to their kid.
Yeah, I don't know what my parents were doing at the time.
And then years later, people go back and their soul is looking for, what are the best films? What are the best horror films that I have ever seen? What could be the best horror films out there, period? And because the selection of which you could pick those golden horror movies, there are so few of them that your brain goes back to your childhood. Aha, The Thing. Because I freaking loved it. It had great special effects and it affected my mental stage at a young age. And that's why it's a fantastic horror film.
But by cards, man, the history is full of great horror movies.
Well, I'm trying to make the point that I think The Thing is nothing special, 1982 Carpenter. It's well made. The structure is good, but it's not so good that I would raise it on a pedestal and say, hey, this is one of the greatest horror or thriller movies ever made. I don't know where that's coming from, honestly. I can't understand it.
So this is the moment, as a part of the background work research for today's episode, I actually went on and I checked out Merriam-Webster's definition for the word of wrong opinions. The definition went, most of Karri's opinions when it comes to movies. So dear listeners, you are seeing the master as his craft.
Yeah, but okay, Henrik, ball to you. Why is this one of the greatest horror movies ever made? Full stop, period. Period, full stop.
Because it really well nails down that the feeling of isolation and paranoia, it's extremely suspenseful. Because you don't actually know who is assimilated and where the attack comes from. That the attacks in this film are really surprising when you see it the first time, because, like said, you don't know who is assimilated. But at the same time, the violence is really cold, and it has really good special effects. And it's also a film that tonally, through its violence, is actually the closest one to Campbell's short story. It operates like you would think a novel operates. But as the story progresses, as the paranoia is meant to set in with the characters, the whole narration of the story, it becomes more quicker. It becomes more jumbled. It becomes a hell of a lot messier. To a point where all of that is intentional degeneration of the prose in Campbell's story to mirror the whole mental effect that the situation has on its characters. And 1982, John Carpenter kind of does exactly that. With its jumbled way of telling its story. You lose the time frame, you almost lose the chronological order of events, you lose any sense of actually following who is assimilated and who had the keys and who actually sabotaged the blood samples before the first test and when was Blair assimilated. It all becomes messy, and in my opinion it becomes messy in order to mirror Campbell's story. And those are the many reasons why John Carpenter's The Thing from 1982 is a bloody masterpiece.
Oof, well, oh wow, I haven't heard you say that like almost ever in this podcast. Masterpiece.
And actually, I have entire multimedia franchise to prove my point.
I bet you do. I bet you
Because
have
these days,
also those comics related to this.
actually, yeah.
Oh my god.
Because these days, even though we don't really remember it or we don't really acknowledge it, but The Thing, it is a multimedia franchise. And when I say The Thing, I actually mean John Carpenter's The Original, because that's the source where all of this stems from. We have 5 different comics. We have The Thing from Another World, which is not so great follow-up to Carpenter's film. We have Climate of Fear, which is actually quite good follow-up to Carpenter's film. We have Eternal Wolves, which I haven't read, but I'm aware of its infamous nature and the whole thing falls in love and yada bullshit and aspect of it. We have Questionable Research, and we have The Northman Nightmare, which came out in 2015 or somewhere around that time period. So it's relatively new comic. We have one official video game, which is actually quite good. We have 3 different board games, plus a board game module for Final Girl, which is also actually, well, quite good board game. We have one short story collection called Short Things, which actually has some really good stories there. We have unofficial sequel, short story to Campbell's novella, The Things, which actually follows the movie's happenings from The Things perspective, and while not a 100% masterpiece, is still actually pretty good take into the perspective of The Thing. And then with 2011 we also have Harbinger Dawn, which is a Thing-esque sea vessel horror film from the practical effects studio that made the effects for the 2011 version that were then, painted over with, at times, quite okay, at times horribly bad CGI. So we have all of this content, and only Harbinger Dawn comes from the 2011 film, or a film other than John Carpenter's version.
Yeah, the CGI was never really my problem with the 2011 version.
The CGI is the aspect of 2011 version that usually gets pointed fingers at when everybody tries to explain why the film does not work. While I do admit that the CGI at times is really bad.
Okay.
I know it's 2011, from 2011, but even back in the day, there were CGI shots that I really thought that, oh my god, that is lackluster. But the reason why the 2011 version does not work, it's not just the CGI.
No.
In my opinion, it's also the characters, it's also the tone of the film.
Yeah, whereas I think that 1982 film, I do think that the Carpenter film, though, does almost everything better than the 1951 version. And I would even say that thanks to Dean Cundey's work, there's a certain atmospheric thing going on, kind of like some soundscapes and things from 1981's Halloween 2 are still noticeable here. So I do enjoy all that, and Dean Cundey's eye to the sets where he wanted some pipes into the picture and something that makes it look a little bit more grueling, I guess. But the movie just fails to be fun for me. I think it's a dull movie, and I think all of these movies are, in some sense, dull. And
I understand the point you are coming from. You explain your side very well.
I don't know.
I just don't agree with you at all.
Yeah. It becomes so subjective with these films. There's things that I like, and there's a lot of things that I don't like. It's just really hard to, nail it down, what to say about this film, because it's so all over in your head that you don't know where to goddamn park your car. It's infuriating. But do you want some quickies?
Well, yeah, why not?
The performance pedestal. I'll say Kurt Russell, even though there's not much characterization, but I enjoy looking at his performance.
Also for me, Kurt Russell, if I would have to pick someone else, I would take Keith David, who plays Childs in the exact same movie, which is Paranoia and Isolation. I didn't really like... They are meant to be an element in 1951, but I didn't quite feel it.
It's not there in 1951 because it gives a lot of room for the comedy for sure. It might be a little distracting at points when the lady goes like, oh, what was it? Let me look it up. In the middle of the final scene, lady goes like, if I start burning up again, who will put out the fire? Oh. I like the location, but I don't know. Fucking destroy the whole base and try to run into some caves or... I was missing something.
You freeze to death if you try to do that.
So, Henrik, did you think that MacReady was the thing all along? I haven't heard the actual explanations on why some people might think that, but I didn't get that.
I also didn't feel that. I'm hesitant on calling the shots on the question, is Childs the thing? Like, I know 15,000 YouTube videos have tried to answer the question and analyze the film in order to answer the question. I haven't seen any of those. I automatically skip them. And I have to confess that as an analytical film critic, I haven't been able to actually make my mind, has Childs been assimilated? No. That, however, is a plot point that basically every other part of the multimedia franchise aspect of it apparently seems to be able to make its mind on. Like in all the comics, it turns out that Childs is assimilated. In the video game, he wasn't. You find his frozen corpse at the end of it, but MacReady somehow pulls it off.
It seems to be a subject that Carpenter is a little cagey about as well. He doesn't want to disclose who he thinks or knows is the thing at the end, if so. But kind of like touching on some of your points, like one thing I'm sort of sick of are these pop culture junk movie watchers on YouTube. You know, this type who gets excited about cool effects and then they appreciate the trashy dialogue and get all excited about it. They cling on to this, to what I see like micro aspects of the movie, and then somehow they praise the movie as a whole to high heavens. Therefore, the movie is the best ever. Like I just.
Well, welcome to this very podcast.
Yeah.
Basically, my shtick from episode to episode.
I also kind of like the third act connection of 2011, The Thing, to 1982, The Thing.
I really, really hated them. The aspect I did like in 2011 is the fact that they come up with another way to deduce who has been assimilated. They don't have to use the blood test from Carpenter's film because they figure out the whole teeth filling thing aspect. And I honestly that is cleverness from the writer's end. One of the best aspects of 2011 and an aspect that does not get credit enough is the fact that they find a way to deduce who might be assimilated and who is not without needing to use the blood test from Carpenter movie.
Yeah, I think the thing without the blood test made a little bit more sense in the 2011 version versus the blood test where they expect something to jump out of the blood to determine if somebody is infected or not, or whatever they are expecting to happen. What didn't work, Henrik?
Well, once again, it's we're talking about 3 films, so to kind of jump all over the place. In 2011, what didn't work was the prequel aspect. In my opinion, it is the biggest hindrance of the film, and if it would have chosen to be anything else except a prequel, it could have opened its, arms to a way stronger and way wider array of plot lines. It could have been The Thing on a submarine. It could have been The Thing, but in New York. It could have been The Thing, but in space. Had it not chosen to be a prequel to Carpenter's film, which automatically ties it down into Antarctica. In 1951 version, what didn't work? Well, my biggest problem with the film was and still is two things. A, the thing is just, a Frankenstein, except impervious to bullets, which kind of was Frankenstein's monster also. And the second thing is the kind of a jovial nature of it all. It's kind of a charming, the innocence of it all, but at the same time, to me, it really harms the possibility of having a horror effect with the movie.
Yeah, for me, like I've mentioned kind of everything, but many things didn't work, but the characters didn't work in any of these films to full effect, and the antagonist certainly didn't work in any of these films to full effect. One thing that I will mention also that did work in 2011 version, in a way, was the stupid but entertaining moment when they went to the spaceship. Because since 1951 version, I've been like, can you go to the goddamn spaceship? Of course, in 1951 version, they blow it up. Oh my gosh. We got a different setting.
To me, the last third of that film is the most definitely the worst part of the movie. It reaches the peak stupidity when they reach the spaceship.
Henrik, the peak is still to come when we get the kind of Prometheus/Alien Covenant type of origin story for the aliens. I mean, I wanna see that, a vegetable on a spaceship. How does that work? Or this kind of a shape-shifting monster. What kind of a thoughts and motivations does this creature have?
Well, if you want the thoughts, so like I said, there is the short story, The Things, which you can also listen to in an audio format from Clark's World publications. And if you want the stupid Prometheus-esque aspect of all of it, you kind of have it already in Prometheus. But you also have kind of a shape-shifting alien thingy that just wrecks the place up.
Yeah. Describe the films in one word. Oof.
Shape-shifting, because the films and their tone, also to a part their legacy, kind of keeps shifting from movie to movie.
Hey, that shape-shifting, I will steal that from you, but in the sense of shape-shifting quality.
and this is why Merriam-Webster has you in the background.
Will these films survive the test of time? Yes, obviously. Maybe Howard Hawks' version has been stolen the platform a bit, because also the Howard Hawks version has inspired many films. And oh my god, if you look at the Howard Hawks version, and at the end the doctor scientist man goes to the antagonist and says something like, "Don't you understand my English language? Together we can conquer the world and learn so much." And how many goddamn times have we heard this in sci-fi movies in different iterations? Sometimes it's directly to the alien, sometimes they use the protagonist as the proxy. Please, Ripley, for science!
But for a science man, that is kind of an understandable point to make. Like, of course he would want the dumb alien to understand him and share his knowledge and find a common tongue.
Yeah. Okay.
He's basically the science man of, oh god, so many of 1950s American sci-fi movies. Mm-hmm. To a point where he was parodied in some... I don't remember what was it some Leslie Nielsen really cheaply made space comedy film, or what was it? I can't remember. It has this scene where they're at the spaceship. There's a flesh-eating alien. There's the science man who tries to explain to the whole rest of the crew of the spaceship that they can learn so much from the alien. The alien rips off the science man's arm. And he's like, oh, it's just a playful little thing. It didn't mean any harm.
Oh, right. You really know you're watching the things when...
When a whole bunch of Americans freak out for what turns out to be basically just your typical Finnish winter.
You really know you're watching the things when Windows and Mac are both equally useless in stopping the virus.
Quite a good one, I must admit. Nice touching upon, Carpenter's film. Nobody actually has realistic names. They are just, kind of a hokey names like Childs and Windows.
Yeah, quite odd. Did you like the films?
Yes, and, well, to be honest, yes. I know 2011 is the black sheep of all these films, and you are supposed to hate it, but I must admit, even though I am extremely critical of the 2011, I do think that in many ways it does itself a disservice, and it just should be taken back to the drawing board and make the whole thing again. I still kinda like it.
There are things that I like about all of the versions. Most of all, my overall feeling about this film is that they're, as I've said, like, pretty boring. So, would you ever rewatch these films?
Most definitely for 1982, quite possibly for 1951, and not so likely for 2011.
I will not go out of my way to actually just watch these on my own, but if it starts running on the TV, I'd be kind of disappointed to watch it because I've seen it so many times already, the Carpenter version, and I've done the analysis, I've watched the films, I'm done. I don't need to watch it anymore.
But come on, man, since you don't know who has been assimilated, you have a fear of the unknown.
In Halloween, you don't know the motivation of Michael Myers. It's the blank slate.
You also don't know the motivation of the thing. It's all assumption. They all assume that it wants to take over the world. A miscommunication.
Kind of like Michael Myers accidentally just slips the knife to everyone's stomach. Just happens.
Well, can you prove a criminal intent?
No, it's just a whoopsie-daisy story.
You are just shaming mentally ill.
True.
Shame on you.
Damnation. Would you recommend these films?
John Carpenter's 1982, most definitely. It's a classic. It's one of the best films that Carpenter made. Has made. It is. Go fuck yourself, man.
Wow.
This Halloween, Prince of Darkness, and In the Mouth of Madness. That was it. Some of the best work John Carpenter ever did.
God damn it.
Also huge fan of Christie. All of them better than Escape from New York.
No, I was just about to mention Escape from New York. At least that you should have mentioned, but... So,
yeah, 1982, an absolute classic. Everybody should see it. Everybody should show it to their friends, the specific other. Show it to your neighbor. Show it to their neighbor's dog. Everybody's life is happier and more complete after seeing it.
Don't show it to the poor dog. God damn it! Every time John Carpenter directs a movie, you just know that something's gonna go wrong when there's a husky on the scene.
An Alaskan Malamute, to be exactly specific.
Okay, thank you for the correction.
You're welcome. But it actually is one of the best dog performances ever given.
Holy cow! How did they do that? Yeah.
The dog in that film, who
deserves an Oscar.
God damn, I can't remember what was its name. Was it Jed? If I remember correctly, it was Jed, and it's
genius.
It's he was a dog who performed in whole bunch of well-known dog hero films.
I bet.
Yeah, it was like White Fang, and he was a hybrid actually. To keeping in with the Carpenter's theme of genetical purity. Jed was a hybrid. He was a hybrid Alaskan Malamute and a wolf. And the thing with Jed was that, unlike so many other dogs, he was actually one of the most undog-like dogs. He didn't get distracted, he didn't get excited, he didn't wag his tail when he was doing something correctly. He was just calm and still. And that's why he's one of the best dog performances in movies ever, and you should show it to your dog and to your neighbor's dog and the neighbor's dog's dog.
Was it actually the same dog, did you say, Chet? Did they use the same dog in all the scenes where you needed some intellect to be shown on the screen?
You're mixing up the dog and Kurt Russell. Which I can kind of understand, because Kurt Russell also is very hairy in this movie. I mean, that facial hair is something where you can just dive into it and wrap it around as a comforting blanket around your naked body.
Yeah, you can hide plenty of the things there. Would I recommend these films? 1951? No. 1982? No. 2011? No, also. But as a film historian, as a film buff, yeah, you have to see The Thing. But other than that, you can go watch all the better John Carpenter films out there. You can go even see goddamn Assault on Precinct 13, perhaps. You can go see Halloween. You can go see The Fog, even though it's quite the bore.
Which is nowhere as good as The Thing, let's admit that much, at least.
At least it has a consistent bad guy.
On my end, I would actually also recommend 1951. It has its flaws, but I do think that if you watch it as something else than as an adaptation of Campbell's short story about a shape-shifting alien, it's actually not that bad of a kind of a typical 1950s sci-fi meddling horror-esque film. It's not as good as something like Creature from the Black Lagoon or The Shrinking Man. If you want to watch a bunch of black and white old American sci-fi movies from the era when America was all rage about, the Red Scare, it's not really a terrible film. 2011, I give it a lukewarm yes.
Whoa.
It's not I know. I'm supposed to hate the movie.
What I did appreciate in that movie also was that they combined the role of the scientist and the biologist into the protagonist to give her something more to do.
Yeah. To me, I didn't need that aspect. I kind of actually liked the fact that MacReady was not a scientist in Carpenter film. I do admit that at the same time, yeah, not the best depiction of scientists in Carpenter movies, seeing how what essentially is a blue-collar worker of the community is the one that rises up as the leader and the hero of the film. Yeah. It's kind of what Carpenter likes to do. When it comes to the 2011, it's not a classic like Carpenter was. And it is an unnecessary prequel to a film that really didn't need it. Carpenter, that it's basically a film that answers the whole question that Carpenter already answered in his movie. But outside of that, outside of the unnecessary nature of it, I do think that 2011 is okay enough. A little creature feature. If you have nothing else to do and you have a pack of popcorns, you have a couple of cold ones, and you are just looking for something to watch while you drink your beer and eat your popcorn. It's it's an okay entertainment in that fashion.
Strangely, I have to kind of side with the original reviews on the 1982. Put the films in order of preference.
1982, absolutely, no questions. The second place goes to 1951, and the third place goes to 2011, which it takes, in my opinion, proudly. It's not entirely worthless endeavor.
Alright, well, I will go with 1982 as the first one on my list. I will go as the second. The thing that irks me about 1951 is this: it's quite a dull film, but I do enjoy watching Margaret Sheridan and Kenneth Dobie together, even though the cheesy dialogue kind of drags it. But I will have to just about put to the second place also, like you, the 1951 version. And that would leave, obviously, the 2011 version for the last place.
Not necessarily the judgment that the director originally wanted, but kind of the judgment you have to give the 2011.
Yeah, hey, it's not that bad. I thought it was going to be an absolute torture show, but you know what? 2011 version, it's kind of fun if you don't have anything better to do.
Yeah.
Especially if you've seen the 1982 version, you might enjoy a thing or two.
Yeah. It is sad that Heijningen felt that he didn't want to direct another feature film following the 2011 prequel up until, 2020 when he made The Forgotten Battle. The thing prequel is not that bad. It's not don't ever direct anything ever again bad.
No.
But it is kind of trapped down into being the same movie because Carpenter's films and the film and the setup that Carpenter's the thing, it kind of has no room to do anything else except be the same movie. The Antarctica as a location is way too limiting.
Perhaps, or it's just up to lack of imagination. I mean, wouldn't it be cool if the thing would infiltrate a penguin and then start copying penguins, evil penguins anywhere? Then on to, do they have walruses there? Something, birds.
Which it kind of can't do because in that case,
yeah.
it just flied out or, swimmed away from there.
How funny on scale of 1 to 10 would it be if the thing, when it comes in its unavoidable next incarnation, is just gonna be always going more back and more back and more back in the timeline? Because the next logical thing to do, of course, is the spaceship version of the story. Or, I guess it could follow from the 1982 and see the infiltration of the thing on a city.
I actually do think that could be way more interesting. I actually would be interested to see that film. Hell, it worked pretty well for The Predator. Or if you would have the thing, but in a spaceship. Yeah, I would actually check it out. I mean, hell, it worked pretty well for Jason Voorhees.
Yeah.
Hell, if it would be the thing, but with dinosaurs, I would most definitely watch that.
I was just thinking what kind of a fun things we could have if, I think in the 1951 version, was it mentioned in the novella? I'm not sure. But in the 1951 version, there's something about the ship being there for at least 100,000 years. So that would still place Antarctica in the cold age, it seems, because Antarctica, at least the tropical version of it, would have been 100 million years ago. So that's a little bit more back in time. Before we started recording, Henrik was in WhatsApp like, I'm looking at a man who at length and with effort built his own hell, with the laughing smiley at the end.
So at this point, at the end of the episode, how do you feel about the endeavor that you, one way or the other, kind of already built up for yourself in, I don't even remember how many episodes back.
It wasn't that bad. This time, this was really kind of off-the-cuff episode. It's always good when we're kind of together trying to figure this thing out, and then even though you're saying entirely the different things, somehow I get to, I guess build in words my argument while you're going on about the masterpiece. So thank you.
Well,
this must be the only masterpiece in the podcast history, so there we have it. Finally found it.
I most definitely, I have dropped masterpiece in some episode, I must have.
I'm not so sure. But anyway, now that this is over and done with, I think I'll go to Steam to play the re-release of Quake. Gonna have some fun with that.
That's a weird call. I was expecting the Thing video game.
That could have been it.
Which honestly is not that bad.
Alright.
Like, okay, yeah, the hidden traitor mechanic doesn't exactly work because it's scripted. So no matter how many blood tests you actually, take from your teammates, it doesn't affect anything because at any given scripted moment they will turn out to have been assimilated and you have to take them out. But it does have a still quite fun damage mechanic where at first you have to take the assimilated things health down to 0 with, just your average bullets and then finally kill them off using flamethrowers.
Okay, that sounds like it might be actually the most fun adaptation of all of these, so might hunt it down on Steam or wherever. Christ.
That's a really backhanded compliment.
Anyway, next week, some movies again. I guess I'll see you in the next one.
Until then.
Completely off topic, but did you ever play Exhumed, also known as Power Slave?
I didn't. I know it's supposed to have some type of a legendary status.
So much fun.
I was more of a Duke Nukem 3D guy myself.
Also fun. Yeah, the mechanics, the physics, everything. It's more fun than I would say that in Quake. Well, Quake is more of a horror game compared to Exhumed Power Slave, which has elements of humor in it. It has, I would say, more advanced game mechanics, like the whole jump high and float in the air and levitate, and well, there's quite the inventive guns also in the game, so highly recommended. There are some people there that think that it's always just a Quake or Doom clone and nothing could be further from the truth, so...
Yeah, Quake's biggest hindrance really was the whole John Carmack effect. Like, I know, game mechanics are supposed to be the first thing, and nobody gives a shit about the story. But apparently, nobody also gave a shit about the level design or, coming up with inventive weaponry. Assimilates the assimilation.
Assimilate.
Assimilated. 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 Assimilation. Assimilation. Assimilated. Assimilated. Assimilated.
Assimilating.
Assimilated and assimilated. Assimilated. An assimilate a thing. Assimilation. Assimilated. Assimilated. Assimilated.
I guess assimilate.
And when was Blair assimilated?
The Thing, se jostakin. Tutkijaryhmä löytää etelävän syrjäiseltä kolkalta avaruusoljon, joka on hautautunut lumeen yli 100 000 vuotta sitten. Päästyään ikiästä elävien kirjoihin muotoon muuttava muukalainen alkaa kylvää tuhoa ja kauhua, muuttuen yhdeksi tutkijoista. Kauhuelokuvien mestari John Carpenter, vampyyri, yhdistää Kurt Russellin unohtumattoman roolisuorituksen mahtaviin visuaalisiin tehosteisiin ja Ennio Morriconen mahtavaan musiikkiin. Rautaiset ainekset klassikkoelokuvaan. Kyllä meni.